For Peter, I'd love to, first off, loved everything you had to say. I'd love to hear you talk about the role of design in your organization and how you feel that contributes to the brand and the experience in general.
I think it's a great question. We just built an office here in Cincinnati, actually, for Kroger. We just built one in Walmart, in Bentonville for Walmart, and in Minneapolis, and just 2 new offices in Soho. And again, I think this started from, I love design too, but we obsess over design. The drink packaging went 98 revisions to the bane of my existence, but and we designed the shape of the bottle, and I think it was probably 87 too many, but what the hell. Our packaging, if you look at our core packaging, and again, I'm biased, but I think it's the most beautiful on shelf, and it's very food first and flavor forward. But our physical design, the cafes, we obsessed over the look of that cafe. And by the way, that cafe is one of the 5 most Instagram restaurants in all of New York City, 13,000 restaurants. Not because it's gastronomique or Michelin star. It's a beautiful place to hang out, and people appreciate the design, served in glass bowls with linen coverlets. So all of these little details, even for a simple yogurt company, I think are extremely important. So net from our offices to our packaging to our cafes, we obsess over. To our plants. The plants are beautiful too, beautifully designed. I think it's a huge part. And so the physical footprint of a company, and you guys have, you said if it's anything like this, you guys have great offices too, and you should, it's Interbrand, but we've all been in some pretty crappy offices. I think it's a big part of culture, and I think it's a big part of the brand.
Couldn't agree more.
Other questions for Peter or Jez? Don't be shy. They've got amazing stories to tell. Okay. Here you go.
Hi, thank you both very much for coming and talking to us today. Chobani entered the Greek yogurt market from the very beginning, being very authentic, the DNNA. It's very easy to believe that and to buy into that as a consumer. What kind of advice do you guys have for larger companies that have been around for a really long time, that are kind of chasing trends, and have people at all levels of the organization that are very genuine and truly believe that it's the right thing to do, but have a long-standing reputation as a company that's been doing things differently for a really long time?
I think authenticity is absolutely fundamental. In fact, it's one of those 10 factors that we look at. That's how important we think it is. Not just because it gives you a great opportunity to leverage your history, but because more importantly, if you look at millennial consumers particularly, their desire and interest to understand the background of a company, to understand how much it really means what it says. It ain't what you say, it's what you do. And of course, with social media and other means by which you can dig into an organization, it becomes more and more important every day. So I think authenticity is something which is extremely powerful. And I think it's something which a lot of companies take too much for granted. It's quite interesting, actually. My very, very first sort of job back in the day, working at an advertising agency in London, and I worked on the launch of Budweiser in the UK. And several agencies had a crack at it and had failed miserably. We had the cheerleader girls, and we had the good old boys and all of this, and none of it connected with UK consumers.
All that locker room talk?
Yeah, all that. Yeah. It's just locker room talk. That's all it is. And we latched in quite by accident, actually, to a bunch of old blues musicians, and everyone just grabbed it. And all of a sudden, it went from being a beer which people said, you don't buy Budweiser because what do they know about making beer? Literally 6 months later, you'd sit and talk to consumers and they would say the absolute opposite. It was the authentic American beer, which was almost the brief that we wrote. And that was what got people to hang into it. And it's quite interesting. I saw some advertising over the last few weeks. They appear to be going back to using all this stuff again, which is extremely powerful. It makes you feel like you are buying something real in a world where I think we're all kind of desperate to get hold of stuff which is good for you and which is real.
Yeah, I think it's absolutely true. I would just add one other thing to it. I think authenticity is now a dimensional proposition in terms of, you mentioned in terms of how you act, what you do, how you make people feel, the products you make. So I think we have a lot of authenticity in making Greek yogurt. It's authentically strained, it's 3 cups of milk, and if I were to dissect everyone's formulation, we'd be on that right side, and we did it the right way from the very beginning. But then I think you take the tenets of making food the right way to being good community citizens, to being good cultural citizens at work and giving people the right benefits. To be truly authentic, it has to go beyond the products you make. It has to go into the behaviors of how you run the company and how you treat your suppliers and how you treat the communities you operate in. And if you can do it across the board, which is what we're trying to do, then I think it becomes total authenticity. I'm just making that up, but I think it becomes much, much more powerful.
Sounds good to me. Can I
Yeah.
ask you a follow-up though on it?
Yeah.
Because one of the things that, you are still a relatively young company.
Yeah.
You're only 10 years old, and, you're probably still strong enough not to compromise on your beliefs.
Yeah.
How do you put in place things that prevent people compromising on that? Oh, yeah, we'll just take a little bit. We'll do 2.5 cups, and we'll do... Do you know what I mean?
No, it's-
These things, I want more returns, said the shareholders.
I know. Well, right now I don't want to say it's easy, but it's relatively easy to your point. We're private. We're founder-led.
Yeah.
Founder's our CEO, so, he's adamant about it. But as we get bigger and either we go public or whatever happens, there's going to be more and more pressure to get that return. And I think that's going to be a challenge. I think it'll be a cultural challenge. But what's interesting is, I'll give you one little story. We had a mold recall when I first started. Of course, it happened right when I first started. I joked around I was CMO, I was chief mold officer for a little while. And it was before we had a head of regulatory affairs and head of QA. We were young, it was 3 years ago. And when you're an all-natural product and you're a perishable product, stuff can happen. You can get mold. And it was pretty harmless mold, but again, you want to take it all very seriously, and we apologize and we handle it very differently than some other companies recently have when you have a recall. But not one person, okay, the easiest solution in the world is just put preservatives in the yogurt and you'll never have mold, ever, no matter how hot it is, no matter how many factories you open. But that's against our beliefs and values and our food guidelines. So not one person in the entire company ever suggested that as the solution. They said, we'll do more CIP, we'll hire a massive QA department, we'll be more rigorous, we'll be more vigilant. Not one person, and that comes down to the culture of the company, suggested the easy way out to make the food. And I think, that's just...
That's authenticity.
Yeah, it's authenticity, so...
Hi guys. This question for Jez. When we take a look at the brands on the BGB list and some of the ones up here, what do you think they did differently this year to experience such growth and kind of move that needle?
Sorry, so
brands-
what
the
did these
brands from the
companies do differently this year?
Yeah, what did they do differently this year to experience so much more growth this year and kind of move that needle?
I think, if you take a look down these pillars, as I said, these are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, there's 10 of the top 10 growers, basically. And I think if you take a look under the hood, number one, underneath them, they have actually pretty much all of them. I have the pleasure of knowing most of these companies quite well. Very sophisticated views of how their brand and business work together. They are increasingly pushing into the world of experience. So those two things that we said, you got to have a great strategy and you got to have exceptional customer experiences. So I think if you look at these guys in particular, and actually all of those sort of double-digit growth, it is a common factor that they are taking it very, very seriously. Companies are getting very sophisticated in terms of how they understand how their brand and business interact. And what it means on the inside as well as the outside, so that sort of plus sign that we were talking about. So there is evidence that people are following that. I mean, all of these businesses, any business is on a long journey. And one of the keys to growing a great brand over time is being consistent and being authentic to your roots. I mean, I think, what you've just said, Peter, suggests that, there's probably a very, very bright future for Chobani because you really believe in it.
Yeah.
And again, if you look underneath it, we had the great pleasure of having some of the guys at Facebook with us in New York a couple of weeks ago for the launch we did out there. And, it was all about their culture,
Yeah.
and how they've gradually evolved that over time to make sure that they've still kept hold of their original values and what they believe in. They've managed to keep themselves quite flat. They're not as hierarchical as some of their competitors. Facebook were very quick to obviously have a go at Google and people like that. But, again, if you look underneath the hood of all of these businesses, Lego, sort of incredible renaissance, I suppose, in their business over the last 10 years, led by a fantastic guy. Their CEO is very, very inspiring. Nissan, again, Carlos Ghosn, who's the guy who runs actually Renault and Nissan and a number of other car brands, has taken it upon himself that their brand is vital to the success and the future success of their business. What Howard Schultz did, bringing Starbucks back to its authenticity. The common thread through all of these people is that they fundamentally believe that their brand is important to their business success. You're going to have to run up this end, Vicky. Oh, unless you've got someone there.
This question is for both of you. In your opinion, what truly drives brand growth?
I hate the short questions. Do you want to go first?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a tricky, tough question. I think what ultimately drives brand growth is a myriad of things. I mean, I think it's the products that you develop, and I think it's your pricing, your distribution, your brand idea. So what do you stand for? I talked a lot about being on the right side of the trend and the truth. So if you have a relevant, resonant, compelling brand platform, and you make great products, and you behave in certain ways, whether it be socially and social media, or in a lot of the programs you develop, with your employees, I think you'll drive growth. But differentiation, some of the obvious ones, but you should have a unique product proposition, you should have a unique brand proposition, but fundamentally, you need to be on the right side of the trend and truth and on the right side of the consumer, so that you're modern and you're relevant and you're resonant, and then stay true to that in everything you do. And I think that not only insulates you from the competition, but really makes you a category of one and will propel your growth forward. And I think, and I love what Jez said earlier, and I think, if you lead with the brand should always kind of tell you where you're going and why you're going there. In many ways, the business will pay that off. Yeah. And I think a lot of people do it the other way around, where, this is the business, and let's kind of
and then we'll see if we can
retrofit something.
Yeah.
And I think, so if you can lead brand first and make your business catch up, and pay it off in an authentic way, very, very powerful.
I'll try and give you a short answer to go with your very short and precise question. I actually think really it comes down to people at the end of the day. If you remember, I showed that slide with the cross on it. And this is the way in which you ignite the power. I love that video. That just speaks volumes about your culture and what your leader thinks about the business. And that must make every single human being inside Chobani feel really, really special. And I think combined with that sort of generosity of spirit, if you like, is a very clear understanding of where you're trying to go. So on the inside of the business, the brand is a very, very simple lighthouse, if you like, as to where the organization is heading to. And on the outside, again, you need to understand people. You need to, particularly in today's world where there's so many different products on every single shelf that you walk into, you have to capture people's hearts and minds. So in 2 words, I'd say, well, it's all about people, and it's about matching expectations and experiences. And if you can do that consistently over time, you will grow.
Burning question. Okay.
It's really cold up here, actually.
It's freezing. The next speaker, be sure to bring your down parka up here.
Peter, my question is for you. You talk a lot about, your brand strategy, your model, the culture. You have standing packaging, it's great design. The tone of voice is very consistent across social media. Can you tell us a little bit more about the design, the role of design in your company?
Yeah, I can elaborate a little bit more. I mean, I think beautiful drives our design philosophy. And so, our cafes, we want to make them beautiful. We want people to stay there for hours. And we don't care if they do. We're not trying to get people out as fast as possible. And, we want to make a beautiful cup of yogurt. And so our white mass is this magical, loaded with probiotics and loaded with calcium and loaded with protein. And our fruit is beautifully made. Hamdi spent 1.5 years actually developing the fruit in a very pure way. Like peach yogurt should have peaches, right? 90% of the yogurts out there are flavored. They don't even have fruit in them. It's insane. And so if you're going to make beautiful food, your packaging should reflect that, right? So our design is make it look yummy, make it look beautiful. And that goes for not only, and make it different. So Hamdi actually got, that cup. Now everyone's copied it. I joke around, like our competitors, they have duplication departments. But now, that changed the landscape on shelf, right? And so what's interesting is, in all of our shopper decision tree research, the average consumer spends 20 seconds in the yogurt aisle, right? It's cold, it's foreboding. There's 800 new SKUs on the shelf in yogurt in the last 9 months. I don't know of a single category that's proliferated to that degree. And frankly, it's a freaking mess, and there's sweepstakes and buy one, get ones, and I don't even know what the hell's going on anymore. But what we want to do is, when you get to the Chobani aisle, we want it to be, a little break from all that madness and just celebrate food and the beauty of food and the purity of food. And if you don't have that design ethos, you're not going to capture it. And you're not going to look different. You're not going to stand out differently. So not only the graphics different, but the shape of that cup took Hamdi 1.5 years to go get. He had it actually made in Nicaragua at the time. There was no one in the U.S. that could make it. And think about Hamdi coming back and forth across the border as a Turkish immigrant 10 years ago from Nicaragua. Like, what are you doing down there? Oh, I'm making some yogurt cups. They're like, yeah, right. Anyway, so now everyone's copied that. So now we're going to move on. That bottle, we designed the shape of the bottle, designed the graphics. The meze dips look totally, totally different than anything else in the dairy aisle. And so I think packaging, and I learned this actually from him, how you look on shelf is a massive driver for growth because you're going to be surrounded by thousands of SKUs. And so even our 4-packs, right? The convention of 4-packs are overwrap kind of this rectangle, right? We're doing vertical 4-packs. Why? Just to be different. Multi-serve 32-ounce cups are all in this round cylinder. We're going to do a squircle, a square round one, because it's different. And so if you look at that, it's like the square peg in the round hole. It's different. And so I think be beautiful, let the food speak for itself, and be different and unique. And if that guides your offices and your cafes and your packaging, consumers will be surprised and delighted. They're going to want to buy you. And they're going to want to repeat buy you. And they're going to be okay spending an extra 5 or 10 cents more. So I think it's very underrated. Now, we happen to live, and again, sorry for throwing barbs, but in our category, it's a really low bar. I mean, the yogurt category, there's some really bad design out there. And so we kind of we held ours, we want to look at the Apples and the Nikes of the world because we want to be aspirational. And I saw that article about Apple cohesive branding really got them to the top. They're incredible, right? And if everyone had a little apple in them, I don't mean literally. I mean in terms of the importance of design, they would elevate their own categories. And by definition, they'd elevate the entire shopping experience, no matter what store you're at. So, everyone should be design-led, more design-led, no matter what category. And if we can do it in yogurt, you can do it in beauty, certainly. You can do it in electronics and appliances and anything.
Wonderful stories to tell.